Hello, everyone. It's Jeff Steck from Tylerica Marketing Systems in Austin, Texas. And today, as usual, we have Ken Tucker and Paul Barthel from Changescape Web in St. Charles, Missouri, and Ian Kentel from Outsource Marketing in the Toronto area. So today we're going to dive into the world of conversion rate optimization. We'll just call it CRO. We're going to uncover how small and medium business owners can get more from their marketing efforts without breaking the bank. So we'll discuss what CRO is. There I go right now with the acronyms, right? What CRO is, why it matters, and what the key elements of a high converting website or landing page are. You'll learn how to use analytics to understand your visitors, uncover quick wins for boosting conversions, and leverage your content and messaging effectively. Plus, we're going to share some tips on how to continuously improve your CRO strategies to drive growth over time. So if you're ready to turn more clicks into customers and get more value from your marketing, this is the episode for you. So let's dig in. Ian, let's kick it off and define what is conversion rate optimization and why does it matter for small, medium-sized businesses?
Yeah, we need like a rap or something for Crow. You got to make it sound cool, right? It's a cool sounding acronym. But just as you said, Jeff, conversion rate optimization is really all about the process of improving your website to increase the percentage of visitors who complete desired actions. And for most businesses, desired actions are things like your key calls to actions of booking an appointment, calling your business. If you have something that they can buy right on your website, even better. I mean, that's a true conversion. The other ones are leading conversions, right? There's lots of ways to measure conversions, whether it's from Google Ads to, social media. But the ultimate conversion you're trying to get as a business is, what action are they taking? And is that action bringing them closer to becoming a client, a patient, a buyer from my business? Yeah. And the reason it matters so much is, there's a lot of things that businesses do to, how to optimize the buyer's journey. But the conversion is the most important. And I think we'd all agree. I'm curious what the other guys will say when they jump in. But, the things that we see where most websites fall short is their messaging is unclear and their calls to actions are wishy-washy. Right? If you're not clear on your message and you're not clear on what makes you different and help people through their buyer's journey, informing them, educating, guiding, giving them the things they need to make a decision, which will ultimately move them to do that action that you want. And making sure that not only is the action clear, you're guiding them to that action. It's clear what you want them to do and what they feel they want to do ultimately. But you're repeating that. You're making it easy. It's at the top of the page. It's bold enough, but then you're asking for it everywhere it makes sense on your website. So not just at the top of your page, but throughout. And the reason it's so important is because that's what impacts your ultimate return on investment, right? Your marketing return on investment related to your website, related to your ads. It's so important. And it also, part of improving your conversion rate optimization is experience. So it's not this ethereal idea. It really is rubber meets the road kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. You use the buyer's journey word a couple of times. Websites a lot for sure. But I really think of CRO as, well, conversions in general is anytime you're basically moving somebody from one place in your sales funnel to someplace else. You're converting from one step or one stage in the buyer's journey to another. So yeah, we talk about websites a lot, but there's a lot of other things that go into it too. If Ken and I were talking before we went online about Chamber of Commerce events, right? If you meet somebody at a Chamber of Commerce event and you get them to schedule an appointment with you, that's a conversion of sorts. So I mean, it's all throughout the buyer's journey. The websites, of course, are where we have a lot of impact and control over it. But yeah,
if I can add one additional thing. So like if you have multiple players who impact clients or customers in the buyer's journey. So for instance, in the corporate world, we would have sales teams, we would have marketing teams, and it's a continuum. It's not separate, especially from the perception of the buyer, and that's the key part. Is it's your audience's perception of the process. But if you understand at each step of the way of the buyer's journey where those kind of pivot points are of when they can drop off or continue to choose you, those are the critical conversion points that I think are so important. And if you have handoffs, meaning, in a dental practice, you have your marketing qualified leads coming in, but the conversion point that you should be measuring is a whole bunch of steps in the marketing process. But then when that gets handed off to front reception, right, when appointments are booked, when questions are asked, that to me is such a critical conversion. And then what happens after that is another pivotal conversion point. And every single business has these pivotal conversion points where you can measure, are conversions happening at the most important steps of the buyer's journey.
Mm-hmm. Ken, I know you must have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that jumps to my mind is the grunt test. Donald Miller talks about the grunt test with StoryBrand, and it's like, if somebody lands on your website in, for 3 to 5 seconds, because that's really all you have, can they grunt back what it is that you do, the problem that you solve for them? And I spent a lot of time over the last week or so working on video content, and videos, you got to have that hook. It's got to reel people in immediately. And so, it's not only the clarity of message, it's, you got to hit them right up front with it as fast as possible. And so, that's really kind of my big thought, in addition to what, I mean, I agree with everything else that Ian said, but super important to just get right to the point.
Mm-hmm.
And be, getting to the point in a very clear, concise way.
Yeah.
What's another one of Donald Miller's sayings? If you confuse, you lose.
You lose. Yep. Yep.
I think the other aspect of
bowling balls, and if you ask them to take on too many bowling balls, they can't.
juggle
so
on.
every time that it's not clear, you're adding another bowling ball, and it's
right.
I think, to me, speaking as a former engineer, reformed engineer, I sometimes say, conversion rate optimization brings in a systematic and almost mathematical approach to modeling that buyer's journey and the paths that people take. And when you can do that and you can look at it, then you can improve, right? You can improve every point and strengthen the whole thing along the way.
Yeah.
Paul, I'm going to go to you for the next question, but before we do you have anything you want to jump in on the overall high level, what is CRO and why it matters?
No, because I think we're going to cover a lot more stuff here.
Yeah. All right. Ian, did you want to say something on this one before we move on?
No, I was just going to say you're a recovering engineer. Ken's a recovering,
whatever
guy, right?
He's just recovering.
I'm a recovering corporate marketer. Paul, I'm sure, is recovering from something. Everybody's recovering from something.
Just be careful. You don't want to leave that blank out there, the recovering, and then people are like, wow, there's other things that
It's true. Yeah.
All right. Should we move on to the next question then for Paul?
Yeah.
All right. Paul, you're in the hot seat now. What are the key elements of a high converting website or landing page?
Yeah, we've already touched on a couple of them. The clear value proposition, and this should be in your headlines, your subheadings. What problem do you solve? Is that clear? And we offer great customer service is not a differentiator. It's not a value proposition. Have you ever heard any business say, "Hey, we offer terrible customer service"? It doesn't differentiate you. And Ian talked about the calls to action. And if you ever go to Neil Patel's website, he's got a call to action every 2 sentences, and I mean, and I'm sure he has the data. It works because most people don't convert the first time they go to a website, no matter how they get there, whether they find you organically or some kind of pay-per-click. Ian talked about that buyer journey, and you have to kind of guide them through that. And that's where your calls to action come into place, where they are, like, I think Ian said, wherever it makes sense. And action-oriented language. You have to help guide people through that journey. And as far as the website itself, some of the functionality, page load speed, load time, mobile friendliness, you would think that people would understand that by now, because this is a ranking factor. Load time is a ranking factor. And Google doesn't keep that a secret. And if your load time is horrible, and there's, the different factors I'm not going to get into, but there's different factors that Google uses, cumulative page shift, things like that, which is, page loads and things start moving around. That's a problem if that happens too much. Something else you would think would no longer be an issue, because Google makes no bones about it. HTTPS. I still see websites that do not use HTTPS. That, it won't get you penalized. It's not a penalty, but it can cause Google to, well, I guess it's a penalty. They simply won't rank you. So I guess from that perspective, it's a penalty, that because there's penalties and there's non-penalties that are actually penalties in their own way. So,
Yeah.
so
Major and minor.
What's that?
There's major penalties and minor penalties.
Yeah. Well, Google deranking your site, I think, is a major penalty.
It's a major
Even though
one,
in Google's world, it's not a penalty. They're just ignoring you. And then social proof and trust signals. And this comes to the experience, expertise, authority, and trust. And it's Google claims it's not a direct ranking factor, but there's data out there that suggests otherwise. So you have to establish that authority and that trust, and you do that with social proof, which tends to be off your website. You can bring these, you can bring reviews onto your website, which is a good thing. And I want to make a differentiator here. I'm not saying testimonials aren't important, but reviews like Google reviews, pulling them on your website, that's more important, because anyone can type up a testimonial and say, hey, this is a customer testimonial, even though it's not. But you can't do that with a review. If you're pulling in Google reviews, it's real, and people know that. But any industry associations that have any kind of authority that you're a member of, put those badges on your website. Now, do not link externally off of your homepage. You can do that maybe on your about page if you want to take that badge and then link to that association so people can find out what it's about, but don't do that on your homepage. Do that on an about page or something like that, because you do not want to encourage people to leave your website. But yeah, I think all of those things are part of a high converting website or landing page. And then again, what's a conversion? Ian said ultimately you want people to buy, but I think Jeff said anything that moves people from one stage of the buyer journey to another could be considered a conversion, and you have to be tracking that.
But you also have to make sure you're clear in specifying what your goals are, right? I mean, so
correct.
Some of that might happen accidentally, but you're still going to get frustrated because it's not defined as what you wanted to have happen. So technically there was a conversion, but it's not the conversion that you were expecting or needed potentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, the thing to remember is, this needs to be intentionally designed, right? You can't just slap some headlines on a page. You can't just slap some buttons on a page and expect it to be completely effective. It needs to be well thought out. It needs to be planned. And again, you don't take people from, I think, Paul, you've said it before, the proposing on the first date, right? You don't go from meeting somebody at a cocktail party and go, hey, let's go get married. You've got to move.
Unless you're in Las Vegas.
Unless you're in Las Vegas, then maybe you get away with it. But then that's probably not a long-term customer relationship either, right? So yeah, I think that, intentionality comes into play when you want to really focus on conversion rate optimization, intentionality, and planning it out and recognizing that it's sometimes a series of baby steps. They may happen very quickly. You know, the baby may grow up in a 5-minute web session and go from just, you know, starting to crawl to, you know, running full steam ahead with doing what you want to do. But it's a series of steps to get there usually.
Yeah.
Anything, Ian, Ken, you want to add before we move to the next question?
I don't think so. I think
yeah, no.
they're all good points.
All right, let's go to Ken for the next one then.
Okay.
Ken, how can small, medium-sized businesses use analytics to understand and improve conversions?
Yeah. So, you know, a couple of things that are fairly obvious is one is, you know, how many visitors are you getting to your website and how many people are actually, you know, filling out a form or placing a phone call or whatever that, you know, doing a download, subscribing to your newsletter, whatever that conversion is that you've defined, you know, that's an important metric. Bounce rates are a little tricky because, you know, sometimes people literally just need to go someplace, get the information quickly, like a phone number, so that they can call you, but they go to the website and they leave right away. So it can be a little bit misleading, but if you're seeing consistently high bounce rates, it's an indication that people are landing on your website or a particular web page or landing page and not having the experience that they expected, and they're going and looking for something else. So that's a red flag kind of a thing that you want to monitor for. You know, as well as, you know, if people are just exiting completely from the website right away. So you want to look for those tools that are easy to implement. You know, Google Analytics is probably and Google Search Console are the two things that, you know, really every website should have. You can have heat map tools like Hotjar or something like that actually allow you to see the behavior of where people put their cursors on the website, because most people kind of use the cursor to guide where they're reading. And so, you know, you can look at that data and see, you know, if you think, you know, maybe there's an image that people are skipping right over because they just don't care about it, but maybe you thought it was an important thing to help convert. It just gives you, you know, some visual data and behavior-based data on a particular web page that I think can be really valuable. You know, and then you've got to define your goals and kind of set those paths of what you want to have people accomplish. The reality is, if people don't know anything about your business, statistics say when they land on your website, only 4% of those people who don't know you yet are going to convert. Now, obviously, that's going to change wildly from one industry to the next. I mean, if it's water damage restoration or emergency plumbing services, that number is going to be much, much higher. But you know, across the board, it's only 4%. So, you know, for the overwhelming majority of businesses, you got to realize most people are not ready to convert on that first step. You've got to design this path. How are you going to get people, you know, to take that conversion action? Allie Bloyd, who we had on the podcast, you know, last time, you know, she talks about, you know, that you can actually increase up to 15% of people who are ready to take action if you design ads in an intelligent way from a funnel perspective. So if you're running ads for your conversions, you know, Facebook defines it as awareness, consideration, conversion, basically. And so awareness, you know, 4% of people are likely to make that are ready to make that purchase decision. When you move them into consideration, and also, you know, a little bit more in the remarketing after they've already been on your website, you can expand that to maybe up to 15% or an additional 15%. So you really have to map this stuff out. You have to think about it. You've got to define the buyer's journey, you know, and really you in order to really do that, you've got to do marketing strategy to understand what's important to them. What problems do they have? What help are they looking for? What are the things that are going to get them most likely to take action? You know, if you're selling an expensive service, you probably need to have little micro goals to get them to take some steps, maybe even micro purchases to get them to the point where they're ready to make that bigger purchase. And so, it just really depends on the nature of what you sell, aligning that with, as best you can, the buyer's journey. We don't control the buyer's journey, but we can guide it. And we can only guide it properly if we design it with intent, as I think you mentioned earlier, Jeff.
Mm-hmm. I think.
One other thing too is, look for roadblocks. I mean, there are going to be places clearly where, you're going to see that people just clearly aren't taking the action. As Paul talked about, some technology problems, create those roadblocks, and you need to be paying attention to that. If your website's loading really slow, or if your form for whatever reason isn't popping up, or being pulled onto the page quickly, or you've got a slow video that's taking forever to load, or images, or any of these things, those are roadblocks that deter people from taking action, no matter how good all of the rest of the other content and maybe even all the other design elements are. If you've got things that are preventing people from taking the action you want, you need to address those and get rid of those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned some of the tools and metrics and things to look at, and again, that goes back to you can only improve what you can measure, so that you can know how effective your improvements are. But yeah, that's absolutely important, and sometimes that means in the tools you got to be a little more sophisticated about how you use them. Google Analytics out of the box will give you a lot of good information.
Yeah.
If you really want to use it for a conversion rate optimization, you're going to have to go in and customize some of the events that it tracks, and then make sure that it builds and understands the funnels that you're asking people to follow through. Yeah, I do want to mention, and go ahead.
Well, one other thing too that I didn't mention is making sure you're using UTM codes. Don't just send people to to just the regular URL. Attach something to it so that you can identify where the source of that traffic is coming from, because that's going to tell you where you might want to be making your investment in. Because look, at the end of the day, you could have the greatest website. It could be designed perfectly for, conversion optimization. But if nobody ever goes there and you can't figure out the best channels or the best medium to get people there, it's all for naught. So using UTM codes to be able to track that, to, from external, source, could be social media, could be a postcard. Yeah. I mean, there are a variety of different ways that you can do this, QR codes, whatever. You want to track where that traffic's coming from. And in each traffic source may require a different conversion optimization strategy on the web page. So you may not want to send everybody to the same place, even if the messaging is the same, just because of the channel that's getting people there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we could probably do a whole episode on how to track different things in different places, different tools. The UTM codes, I agree, are important. I'll go back to also be intentional about it and be consistent. And as a refresher for some of our listeners that may not know exactly what UTM codes are, those are the little things on the website URL. After the trailing slash, there's usually like a question mark, and they'll look like UTM underscore medium equals, UTM underscore source equals. And there's about 5 different levels. The source and medium are the 2 most common ones, but you want to be consistent in how you use them. Don't use email, on one and webmail on another, right? You want to look at what came from my email sources. You have to be consistent about how you call it. And then you can use the different layers to create different granularity, even taking it down to an ad campaign. Which ad brought traffic in? I know we're going to talk about ways to improve later on, and they'll become very important there, because you need to know, where things are coming from.
Yeah.
I do also want to hit on, you mentioned heat maps and Hotjar. And I literally, before we got on to record this podcast, I literally was working on that for a client. And there's some fascinating things going on there that these tools can help you find. And by the way, Microsoft, I know we ding Microsoft and Bing a lot because, I mean, face it, Google is the 800-pound gorilla. But Bing webmaster tools are free, just like Google's are free. They're worth setting up to get a different view of what's going on in your website. But
Yep.
Bing has a tool called Clarity. You guys know about Clarity? This is really cool. It's a free heat map tool. It's not as good as like Hotjar, but the level of information it gives you for free is pretty amazing. And we, like I said, literally, I was working on this before we recorded. I had a client where we saw on mobile that people were clicking on the page title thinking it was a call to action. And that's because the calls to action at the top of the page and the page title looked similar, and the language that was used looked similar. We never would have realized that if we hadn't looked at one of those tools and go, why are people, repeatedly tapping on the page title thinking they're taking a call to action?
Yeah.
So
Wow.
that's an improvement we're going to make this afternoon on that website. That will improve the conversion rate optimization of that client's landing page.
Yeah. Cool.
Ian, Paul, you want to jump in on this analytics and improvement? I know we'll get into it a little more. But,
No, not really on that, but something I thought of after the last question when I was talking about testimonials. Now, if you can get a video testimonial from your customer, which is not easy to do, but that's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I just wanted, because I kind of I didn't ding testimonials, but then video testimonials are, because that's a real person. That's a little harder to fake.
Social proof, it's all good.
And there are tools to help get the video testimonials easily as well. So there's a tool for that.
Just an answer to your question, Jeff. I just reiterate what Ken said, like without, and you mentioned this too, like you have to benchmark your conversion rates now and all of your other data. If somebody isn't tracking your data on your website, and this goes, like, conversion rate optimization can happen in your email campaigns. It can happen in everything, right? So if you're not somehow tracking all of this, you're doing all of this activity and you're investing in your marketing. And if you can't benchmark it and then watch it over time and tweak and make improvements like we're talking about, you're at a huge disadvantage to your competitors who are doing this. And quite frankly, you're just throwing spaghetti against the wall and hoping it'll stick rather than using data to inform your decisions, right?
Yeah. Yeah. How's our marketing eating? I don't know. Or, well, it depends. I don't know. How many sales have we got? The sales is the end of the funnel.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about ways to improve things in a second, but if you're not getting all the sales you want, there's many reasons, and working backward up the funnel is one of the things to do. So that might be a good segue into the next question. So Ian, let's continue with you. What are some quick wins for improving conversions without a huge budget?
Yeah, I think the top of my list, we've already mentioned it. I think Paul or Ken might be going into it in more detail, but optimizing your calls to actions, super important, right? Look at your calls to actions. How are you asking for people to act? How are you setting that up? Really key. Sometimes small language changes, sometimes small changes of the color of your call to action can actually have huge impact. If you're, I originally studied as a designer, and there's beautiful design, right? We all understand beautiful design. We can appreciate it, but beautiful design does not always create the greatest sales impact or conversion impact. Sometimes a glaring red or green button to get people to act gets people to act because it's in their face, right? You don't want to be subtle about these things. And the second part of that is you want to make your call to action beneficial to them, meaning, a lot of times people will say, quote request or something like that. But, things like get your quote now, or get your instant quote now, or, flipping it to the benefit that they're going to get is more important than thinking about the action itself in some ways. And then the next thing is to think about secondary calls to action. So assuming that, Ken talked about stats that most people will not act immediately when they come to your website. So what are you doing as a business to continue to nurture that person in their journey, so that even once they leave your website, somehow you're connecting with them. So retargeting ads, of course, somebody else is going to talk a little more about that, I think. But how do you nurture them without giving them something of value? Might be an ebook, might be a checklist, might be something related to their decision-making process. They give you their name, their email address, and you can continue the conversation, which absolutely has been proven, as long as it's done well, absolutely has been proven to raise conversions, right? It just makes sense. You're continually feeding into their decision process even after they leave the website. Creating like clear, concise, professionally written copy and content is so important. People can tell if, I see it all the time where we do, an informal audit for a prospective client. We look at their website and we're like, you have no content on your website, right? You might have some pretty images. You might have the cool video background. You might, to you, it makes sense. You might have, I was on one recently where they created their own term for something. And like, who is that benefiting? If the client doesn't understand that term, they've just made up a really fancy term that nobody knows, right? I've seen that a few times in tech companies. You
probably not going to rank for that keyword, huh?
there is nobody's searching for it because they don't know it. In fact,
well, you might rank for it, but there's no traffic.
Yeah,
exactly. Because nobody's searching for it. But content is really, really important. So leverage video content, as Paul said, not just for testimonials, but for everything, right? Think about the process, think about the decisions they're making, and connect with them with well done video content with great audio. Don't forget the audio. But the content is there to guide, educate, inform, and equip the prospect to make an informed buying decision. That's essentially what you're trying to do. You're trying to, you have all these steps or phases in their buyer's journey. You're trying to create a slide that they can go down as quickly as possible and reduce friction. And the copy makes a big difference. So I highly recommend getting a professional copywriter or an agency that does copyright. You can tell the difference between lay people's writing and professional writing. We already talked a little bit about core difference, but that core difference that sets you apart from your competition, you don't want to be seen as vanilla, because right there you're creating a huge barrier to somebody making a decision, because or they might make the decision based on something horrible, like the aesthetics of what they see, the colors of your website, or price, which is the worst thing, right? You want people, unless you're a lowest price driven business, which most businesses don't want to be, you want to create a core difference whereby people are like, okay, these guys, their message of what makes them special resonates with what I'm looking for and who I am. Mm-hmm. Paul talked about trust factors and testimonials. Having, I'm a part of this association. I've won these awards, like all of these things, security symbols. If, even like the different Visa, MasterCard, Discovery card symbols at checkout are important, because it just reduces people's anxiety about, are these guys going to steal my information? And then forms, I think, are so huge. Ken, I think you talked a little bit about this. Just a little anecdote. We had a client, still have a client, who is in the home services business. And before COVID and during COVID, they had a really lengthy form. It was a really nice, graphically immersive form where it walked you through the process of choosing like which services you need for your home, and then kind of upselling and cross-selling. And it took, at least, I think on average, it took people 5 to 6 minutes to complete. Very lengthy form. And it worked for several years. But then post-COVID, suddenly the market is oversaturated with businesses serving prospects and undersaturated now in people looking for business. And so the brevity of that form, basically we reduced the form because the data informed us that people would come to the form, they might get past section 1, like page 1 of the form, and then the drop off would be considerable. So we basically reduced that form to its core components, and conversions started to go up again. So I think that's really important, is don't think about, hey, we have a wish list of everything we could possibly want to ask in a form. And it's okay to start there, but reduce it down to what are the actual prerequisites we as a business need in order to take them from their interest. They've taken time, they've completed a form. That's a huge step. That's a huge conversion. Now, what do we need in order to contact them and help them make the decision, right? So sometimes that's as simple as we need their name, their phone number, their email address, right? For other things, you might need to know, if you're an arborist or a tree service, you might need to know kind of the general town they're in, and you might need to know what kind of, issue they're dealing with, or a plumber, similar thing, right? Where you can help serve them the best. So I think all of those are really low hanging fruit to me, that people can, quick wins, get some of those things fixed up. Again, a professional can come in and go, change this, change this, change this, just because they have the experience and expertise.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned one thing that I think is worth highlighting, which is, your example of your home services business that had the lengthy form and it was working great pre-COVID, but not so much after COVID. Is things change over time. So that highlights the importance of monitoring and not being complacent and being willing to experiment and keep up with what's changing. Certainly, the shift to mobile is driving a lot of that. And actually, that example I gave a minute ago, the client problem I was working on this morning, it was on mobile that we saw it. On the main website, it's like nobody's mistaking the headline for the call to action button, but when it's on a smaller screen, all of a sudden the headline looks like a call to action. So yeah, things change. What worked last year might not work this year. Things that are working this year might not work next year. So constantly, measuring and looking at things and using it to drive changes is worthwhile. I think also one recommendation I give is be incremental. Don't change everything all at once, because then you won't know what worked and what didn't. Pick what you think is the most important and kind of chip away at it.
That's a huge point. And I was just going to say, the only reason why, first of all, we knew there was an issue with that form for that client was, one, our leads were going really, really well, right? We were reporting every month, like, look at, leads are up, we're doing great. And they're like, sales are down, something's wrong. And we were able to then start to, because we're tracking everything, right? We were able to determine it wasn't an issue with the leads. The leads were still very high quality. It was the form, because again, you could track the conversion metrics in that particular form. It was on a type form, which some people might understand what that is, but it would actually allow you to see the conversion metrics from page to page on that form and the drop off. And so it just goes back to the point Ken was talking about, like, analytics is so important if you want to raise the bar and if you want to squeeze more and more out of your marketing dollars. I think Ken was about to sneeze.
I was about to sneeze.
Let's say all of a sudden he just blanked out there. It's like,
yeah.
Oh no.
You had that look.
Yeah. So I would just, I would add though, Ian, look, it's an art and it takes some experimentation, but you also do need to design your forms to disqualify people sometimes as well, so that you're not wasting a massive amount of time. So, you got to figure out, okay, well, I need their initial contact information so that I can follow up with them. But at the same time, how can I get enough information from them to know that I'm not wasting their time or mine? And so like the example you mentioned with the arborist, if they put in the form, that they're outside of the normal service area, now, the business can respond in a different way. Instead of getting somebody on the phone to have, a 15-minute conversation, they may just say, I'm sorry, we don't serve that area, and go from there. So.
Yeah, Ken, perfect example of that. I worked with a home services business on that exact issue. Their form was too long. We're trying to pare it down, and they wanted to know people's address before the appointment was even set up. I said, well, can't you ask for that on the phone? Because a lot of people are going to go, I don't want to give you my address yet. Right. I'm not at that point. You don't have the trust. They haven't worked their way far enough down the know, like, and trust funnel to decide that they want to give you that information.
Right.
And they said, well, we want to qualify people out that aren't in an area we service. I go, well, can we just do that on the zip code? We need the whole address. So
Yeah.
again, examples of
Good point.
incremental changes and asking enough to qualify, but not asking so much that you're turning people away.
Right.
It's that whole date before you marry concept that you were talking about earlier.
Ian, did you mention? I'm sorry if I zoned out on this. Did you mention chatbots and live chat? As,
I did not cover that.
I think those are, again, making it easy for people to move themselves in a certain sense along the funnel and engage. And I think that's also some low hanging fruit. I know Paul loves live chatbots, right? We get him to chime in on that, but
Yeah, they can be interesting. We're battling with one right now.
Just make sure you monitor the discussions. Like, some people think it's a set it and forget it technology. It is not a set it and forget. Like, AI can go off the rails so quickly. So you better at least do like these, occasional audits of the conversations it's having. And most chatbots allow you to do like thumbs up and thumbs down for what the chatbot is saying. For you as the administrator, like, you can say, that wasn't a good response, and here is the response we would prefer for the business.
Yeah, but again, the whole point of conversion rate optimization is to lead people down the pipe and the funnel, and to do it as efficiently as possible, as effectively as possible. And chat is another way to help people move forward, to let them get information and to ask them things to qualify them and suggest actions for them to take. So, yeah.
And it's the new form submission in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
A lot of people, they go to your homepage, they don't want to click that contact button. They see that little chat icon down there. They click on it, and they want to get stuff right then and there without leaving that page. And, so if you can at least get them to say, I need to speak to somebody. Okay, what's the best contact information and time of day to reach back out to you? Blah, blah, blah. They answer that. Okay, great. One of our associates will be in contact with you, to see how we can help. That's, people are doing that over filling out a lot of forms these days.
Yeah.
Remember that movie Yes Man with Jim Carrey? I don't know if you ever saw that, but the whole premise was he had to say yes to everything that came through his life. And it occurred to me as we were talking, like, it would be so funny to actually create like this test AI chatbot where it always says yes to everything somebody brings up, and see what the results are.
Interesting.
It may have high conversion, but not good conversion.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Let's see, Ian, you hit on content a little bit. Ken, let's jump over to you and go into content a little deeper. What role do content and messaging play in driving conversions?
Well, I think it's huge. Your headlines, not only do they play an important role from an SEO perspective, but it plays a really important role in adding that clear communication to what it is that you do. I mentioned hooks earlier. Honestly, I think one of the things that I think an underutilized tool that people don't take advantage of is running paid ads, because paid ads are the easiest way. They may not be necessarily the cheapest way, but in the long run, they probably are cheaper when you take this strategy. Use your paid ads, because the paid ad platforms give you great facilities for doing variations of that ad. Running different combinations of headline with, body copy, with the creative, the visuals, whether it's pictures or video, and using that to dial in what is getting the best response. I'm constantly amazed when we run Facebook ads for clients. Pictures that I think are going to perform really well are very often the pictures that perform mediocre, or maybe even the worst, and that there are other pictures that perform a whole lot better. And so it's really interesting to, how does that translate, to conversion optimization on your website? Well, Now you know that maybe the image that you thought you had in the hero image section at the very top of your page, maybe that doesn't really resonate or tell the story that you thought it was telling to people. And you know that because, people didn't respond to it when they were seeing it as an ad put in front of them. So you can use a picture, that picture or a similar picture, to improve, the hero image of your website, for example. Headlines, what ads are performing better? Do people want to see testimonials? Do they want to see, the how you're solving the problem? Do they need to see a combination? All of that is going to roll into what maybe you decide to put on your landing page. We have good best practices that tell us certain things that we should be putting on there, but ads give us some really sophisticated tools to be able to check that out and test that out. The emotional appeal of the way we write something. I'm a huge fan of using problem, focusing on the customer's problem and using their language and focusing the content that you have on how you solve their problem. What are the benefits to them of solving the problem? It's really easy for all of us working in our own businesses to fall into the feature trap. We get seduced by the features that we think we offer sometimes, and that's the language we frequently default back to. And features don't necessarily solve problems. Because there may not be that connection in your potential customer's mind that this feature solves this problem. But if you use problem language, you kind of eliminate that. And I think that, a lot of people make the mistake of listing features and not addressing, the problems and the benefits. Marketing is ultimately about transformation. People need to be able to visualize, on your website, it could be a PDF that you mailed to them or a postcard. They need to take that piece and they need to be able to visualize what their life is going to be like if they work with you. Are you going to be solving their problem? Will they get the best looking house in the neighborhood? Is the hassle of weekly yard maintenance taken care of? What is the big problem that they want to address? So I'm a really, really big believer in that. And, a lot of the part we've talked in the past, a lot of people hire people to do point solutions. I'm going to hire somebody to do my social media advertising. I'm going to have somebody do my website. I'm going to have somebody do my postcard or my email campaigns. Well, when you do that, I guarantee you 99% of the time, you're missing the cross-pollination of what one channel is telling you and how to improve another channel. And so I think it's really, so if you're going to take that strategy, at least have somebody assigned to have the authority to make sure that information is being shared and integrated in an appropriate way.
Mm-hmm.
Like a force multiplier, Ken.
Exactly. A force multiplier. Amplification. Got to get that word in there too. And I think that all kind of ties back into an omni-channel approach. I mean, if you're only using one platform, you're not necessarily getting the data to help you make the best decisions, because these other platforms, I think, very frequently inform you of how something could work and operate better. But if you're not taking advantage of that, you're missing the opportunity that you could apply to the one platform that you decided to go with. So omni-channel is, I think, always important if you can afford to do it, because there are just so many benefits to it. You also, I talked about micro commitments earlier. I mean, you really want to try to think about how do you get people to continue to take those additional steps, and really thinking through, what is going to get people to take that action. If you're making a big purchase, like you're going to be doing a kitchen remodel, it could be when you land on somebody's webpage and their chatbot is giving you good, useful information to help you determine what you really need to think about before you even formalize what project you want or the contractor that you need to hire, that's immediately building trust, and likewise, if your chatbot's not giving that good information, it's just giving generic information. It's like, okay, well, I don't know that these people really know what they're talking about. You got to think about all this stuff, right? And so, yeah, I mean, there's a lot to it. At the end of the day, this is where we talk about the importance of strategy, whether it's an explicit strategy engagement that you hire somebody to do or whoever you work with from a marketing perspective. They've got to have the strategy in place that you agree and that you trust is the right approach for your business, and the right set of tactics, and the right messaging and the right target audience and all that kind of stuff. And every company does things a little bit different. Some businesses, some marketing companies will do a specific marketing strategy engagement first. Others will kind of bake it in as like the first month, before they start to execute, or the first, 2 months or whatever it might take. But it's so important.
And just a point about that, like, I don't know if you guys run into other agencies providing true strategy based on data, like running an audit, doing the rigor of detail that you need to do to actually create a strategy. I actually so rarely run into that as an agency. The competition, we have best practices that we almost always introduce into our clients, but if the client will allow us to, we do an audit, we build out a strategy, we build out messaging. I almost never run into other agencies that do that type of rigor and detail and quality work that you just talked about is so important, right? It's amazing that so many other agencies don't do that work.
And for our listeners and viewers, it sounds like it's an extra expense, and on the front end, yeah, maybe it is, but it also gives you a great way to make sure that you are comfortable with the company that you're going to be making bigger investments with. And I mean, marketing is critical to the survival of every business. And if you get it wrong, it can be devastating to your business. And so it's a great, what we call try offer, even though this is maybe a bigger ticket try offer. You're learning what it's like to work with somebody and how they approach things. And the results of that, if it's done well, even if they're not the right company to continue to work with, you're going to have a lot of value that you can hand to somebody else, or decide that you want to go with an internal team or whatever. But, all of it comes back down to, the ability to set baselines and get the right measurements in place, and just really look at optimization and improvement in a continuous manner over time.
We all run our agencies slightly differently, right? We all have our own kind of nuanced approach, but we've gotten to the point in ours where we almost never, like, we've baked into our programs now where we always do the audit, we always do strategy, because we found, like, we cannot serve our clients to the level that we want to serve our clients and that we know is in their best interest without doing that. So, I think if, make sure if you're considering an agency, talk to the agency and really ask good questions about strategy, and watch out for like the mesmerizing sales speak.
And pretty metrics dashboards,
because
they're probably vanity metrics,
Yeah.
Ken, you mentioned a couple things that drove a couple thoughts for me. One of them was, especially, if somebody is picking and choosing, they've got somebody running their ads, they got somebody building their website. And again, it goes back to the overall strategy and the coherence that Ian mentioned. But just as a concrete example of that, and the role that content messaging play in the conversions, I had a company, this is pre-COVID, several years back. They were reselling air purifier machines. I may have mentioned these before in the podcast. And it was during the time when they had all the fires going out west, and specifically California. and they just wanted me to run ads, which we eventually agreed to do. But we told them, but you need better landing pages. You need content that educates and informs people about these products. You can't just be an order taking site. We were driving 10% ad conversion, which is huge in the ad world, right? 2%, 3% is considered kind of good. We're driving 10% ad conversion now, taking advantage of what was going on out at the time out in California. But he was saying, I'm not getting any sales. So again, conversion rate optimization problem. We converted the people who saw the ads to website visitors, but he wasn't converting website visitors to buyers. And I asked him, I said, did you make the landing? I knew he didn't. I said, did you make the landing page changes yet? Did you add the informative content? No. So perfect example of why everything kind of plays together, and the content and messaging is so important to getting to the ultimate conversion that you want, which is sales.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to piggyback off that real quick, I mean, and this is completely a topic for another podcast, but, the handoff from marketing to delivering the leads to, the sales process that closes the leads and turns those into sales and revenue, that needs to be factored into the overall conversion rate optimization process. But also you need to realize that a lot of the sales activity is outside of it in most traditional organizations.
Mm-hmm. We close out this question and move to the next, or any last minute thoughts on this one?
Good.
All right. So Paul, let's jump back to you. How can small, medium businesses continuously improve their CRO efforts over time? So not necessarily quick wins, but just in general, what do they need to do to continuously improve?
Well, see, the key word there is continuously. This is we talk about A/B testing a lot, and that I guess let me start by saying when COVID hit, and Ian had mentioned this, that there was some saturation because a lot of people that were not really making a lot of effort into their digital presence realized that they had to now because of the nature of everything that happened. And I don't think it's ever going to go back to where it was. So we talk about A/B testing, like websites, things like that. That's usually probably part of a larger SEO plan. It's something that's ongoing. It's not something you do one time and you're done. So it is an investment to be doing those kinds of things. And that will help you. The idea of A/B testing is you optimize. So you do your A/B test, you make some optimizations, then you do another A/B test, and then you make some optimizations. It's an ongoing thing. So you have to understand that, and you have to pay attention to the data as we've talked about. And then, you have to keep informed and updated on what's going on in your industry and trends and best practices. Google Trends can help with that. It's a pretty good tool. And customer feedback, I know we're running short on time. We're coming up on an hour here. Customer feedback, surveys, any kind of customer feedback, but this is something you may want a third party to do. And the reason I say that is if you as the business send out a survey or call customers, they may not be willing to be quite as blunt with you, for lack of a better word, as they may with a third party. And negative feedback is important because if, there's saying you never learn when you're winning. You learn from your defeats and failures. And if you have a third party do these surveys and you get negative feedback, now you know where you need to improve. And I think that's really important, that a lot of businesses, they want to do this themselves. It's like, well, that may not be the best approach because they may not be as honest with you as they would with a third party. And you want that honest feedback so you really can improve.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would add that if you have a third party do it, you may want to let your customers know so that they just don't think they're being phished or spammed, right? But let your customers know, hey,
or either that, or the third party can say, hey, we're doing this survey on behalf of whoever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's just not out of the blue.
Right. And that way there's some distance there.
You mentioned A/B testing, and we've mentioned it earlier. The joke about A/B testing is it stands for always be testing.
It
But
does.
the idea is simple. It's you're always running two alternatives, right? The A and the B. Which one is working better? Throw
And
out the one that isn't, and then try another variation and see over time you can incrementally improve by continually trying things and picking the one that works better.
yeah, and when I said it's a continuous effort there, I don't know of any free tools, free A/B testing tools that actually work. Most of the ones that work fairly good are intuitive to use. It's a subscription or it's something you buy. I'm sure there's free ones out there. I see like Google Optimize. I think it was last year, probably a year ago at this point, that it was never the easiest thing to use, and now it no longer exists. So if you were using Google Optimize, you're not using it anymore because they put it to bed, put it in the grave.
Yeah, Google is very good about, they are A/B testing, right? They're very good about constantly trying things and seeing what people like and what they don't work, and then putting it to bed, as you say. There's a lot of things that Google has done over the years that don't exist anymore.
Yep.
Yep. But yeah, I mean, ultimately it comes down to know your numbers, look at the numbers. What are the numbers telling you? And look for the big discontinuities. The one I mentioned with the ads that were converting really well, but the website wasn't. You got to look at all different levels of the funnel and be experimenting at every level, and work on increasing the numbers over time. I will add one thing is that from a bang for the buck point of view, I guess maybe I should have thought of this earlier. The lower down the funnel you are, the closer to the buying decision, the more impact and optimization will make. In other words, if you're up at the top of the funnel where you're trying to get 3% improvement, you go from 10,000 ad impressions to 10,300 ad impressions, or whatever the math works out to. That's not going to affect you as much as an improvement at the bottom of the funnel, where even one or two more sales can make a big difference, right? So look at the whole funnel, but maybe work from the bottom up, and see where the problems are and where the impacts are, to really focus on. So yeah, we are right, I guess, a couple minutes over an hour now. Anything anyone wants to add on CRO in general? Any of the questions that we've discussed?
Well, I'll just add that this isn't free. This work is hard work, and it's another order of magnitude of marketing service. And I think a lot of people, they want to go cheap. You might wind up getting some pretty good results, for cheap at that lower level investment. But if you're really looking at how are you going to be saving money over time, and how are you going to be improving quality of the growth that you're getting in a better, more predictable way, this is an important thing to consider, and it's not free, and a lot of people don't really offer this because they're desperate for your business, and so it's just you get what you pay for ultimately.
And I would add too that part of why this isn't done is a lot of marketers actually don't understand this concept very well, right? Like it's kind of I was going to say level 2, but it's probably like a level 10 as far as marketing knowledge, because it just takes deeper understanding, deeper analytics, investments, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's really easy. It's easy to use an example from advertising. Google makes it easy to launch an ad campaign anymore, relatively easy. Facebook makes it relatively easy to, even though the user interface is a little clunky and always confusing. It's relatively easy to just do a boosted post. On Facebook, for example, you're paying for advertising, but how much money are you wasting? And the bigger question is, what opportunity are you missing out on? Because the opportunity cost is something that almost no business decides to measure for whatever reason. Opportunity cost is massive. It's probably bigger than what the wasted money you're spending in almost every scenario that I can think of. So, it's a lot. It's easy to build a website. There are a lot of technologies that allow you to stand up a website very easily. Standing up a good website's not so easy.
Mm-hmm.
It's the difference between the feeling that activity equals momentum, and that's not true at all, right? Like it just feels like because you're doing stuff, you're getting stuff done, that's actually true momentum for your business. And I think that's where a lot of businesses get lost, because they're like, we're doing stuff.
Yeah.
I'll jump in and add my final thought, which is, if you, which I hope our listeners truly believe their marketing is an investment in their business, then conversion rate optimization is a way to leverage that investment. It's a way to improve the rate of return on the investment, because it's going to, at every step of the funnel, it's going to improve conversions if you do it right, and that's going to lead to more sales. So it's a good place to wrap. Oh, go ahead, Paul.
The only thing I'd add is that you cannot really have an effective marketing campaign without a true CRM. You've got to have that. And there's a lot of things that can be automated. And Ken had mentioned UTM, and not going to go any deeper into that. Other than that, that's your attribution. That really helps with your attribution, letting you know what's working, what's not working.
Yep.
And I'll leave it at that.
All right, then I think we are at a good place to wrap up. Ian, do you want to take us out?
Surely. That's not your name, but thank you everyone for joining us. This was a great topic, Jeff. Thanks for leading us through it. Thanks for our audience who joined us. And of course, we invite your submission of questions. Throw out your marketing challenges to us and see if we can do a podcast episode on that. And if you're getting value from this podcast, please subscribe to it, share it, and you will help this podcast grow. And until next week, folks, keep calm and market on.